our experience of building scalable, remote capable teams over the last many, many years. We have learned a lot of things that work, many that don't, and we're happy to share. And there are a lot of people who thought this would take a few weeks and then we'd be back at the office. And now understanding that this might be a semi-permanent change, right, for a lot of companies, because the tech startups are leading the way and they're saying remote work indefinitely, right? So.
Hello and welcome to the Working From Home podcast with your host, me, Nelson Jordan. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Lavinia Iosub, who is a location-independent entrepreneur, a managing partner in Liv.it International, and we'll be talking today about the future of work, co-working, and co-living. Lavinia, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long, long time. You've got so many interesting stories that our audience are going to be thrilled to hear. So I've been looking forward to it. So you have lived and worked and traveled all over the world to the point that I am very, very jealous of some of the countries that you've been in. Where are you from originally, though?
I'm Romanian, but I'm not a vampire.
Is that a common thing? The kind of Transylvanian link?
Yeah, people will go vampires, gymnasts. I'm happy to, basically go into all of them and have a good conversation, because that's how we get rid of small talk usually, right?
Just go straight into the vampire conversation. I mean, from the photos, I've seen that you have some spectacular castles and things.
Yeah, absolutely. Transylvania's got beautiful castles and beautiful nature for those digital nomads that enjoy gorgeous treks and an odd castle here and there and great internet and good food. So I thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going somewhere with someday with my wife. I think she'll love that, because she's loved kind of not just vampire stories, but just mythology in general. She's always been a big fan. I think when she was younger, she studied classics and things, so she really does enjoy that sort of thing. So I think it's definitely on our list. But yeah, so when you're growing up in Romania, is it quite common for people to learn English, or have you kind of developed that later?
I would say it's common for people to learn foreign languages. So a lot of people will learn English. Some of us growing up would learn one of the Latin languages because it's quite close to our own language. So some people would learn Spanish or French or Italian. So I would say, at least I don't know exactly these days, but in my generation, I would say that foreign language training was pretty good.
Fantastic. And when did you kind of start to leave Romania to go on these kind of extended travels, whether you were working in the countries or where you were living? When did that kind of start? So
I grew up in Romania during a time where we were transitioning between a pretty brutal communist dictatorship, which I fortunately didn't get to live in for very long. I was very, very young when the revolution happened, transitioning towards an EU, NATO developed country. So I kind of came of age in a time where we were starting to have all of this amazing exchange programs, travel programs, sort of work and travel, ISEC, Erasmus, and all of this things that you can take advantage of. And I fully did. So I basically started traveling for short periods of time when I was fairly young, probably 15 or so. And then I moved to the US for an internship in 2008, so that would be about 12 years now. And then I went for an exchange for studies in Belgium via the Erasmus program. And then I did another internship in the UK. Then I went, I kind of decided to go for a management position in the same organization, youth leadership organization in Azerbaijan, because I kind of wanted to go to a country I didn't know much about. So there were a few options, among which Bahrain and Azerbaijan. So
Sure. And with Azerbaijan, whereabouts were you staying? Were you kind of in a city, or were you in villages, or?
I was in Baku. I was in the capital. I did travel extensively in the regions as well, and I worked to expand the organization, the NGO that I was, the platform I was working for, in a smaller town as well, called Ganje. But yeah, I was, for the majority of the time, I was in Baku.
Mm-hmm. So I personally, I don't know very much about Azerbaijan as a country or a culture. Were they kind of quite accepting to you as a foreigner coming to their country, or was there kind of a bit of a learning period where you're accepted more in some places than others?
I think Azerbaijan, Baku specifically, has had foreigners coming in as expats for a long time, because a big part of the economy relies on oil and gas. And so there would be particularly lots of British people, actually engineers and all kinds of, basically technical and oil and gas people. Mm-hmm. So I would say it wasn't extremely surprising for Azeri people to encounter a foreigner. Obviously, there were, there are regions where that's more of a casual thing. There are regions where it's more of a, wow, kind of an exotic fact to come across. But yeah, so I would say they also really enjoy the connection with Europe and have very European aspirations. They have they participate in Eurovision and the European Games and all of those things.
I love that. I think that's the ultimate European stamp card, right? Is, are you in Eurovision or not?
Right. But then we do have countries like Australia, which are nowhere close to Europe in Eurovision, right? So they're culturally similar, I guess. Sure. So I would say they were Azerbaijani people are very hospitable people. They are just they would take you in as one of their own, and they would be so nice and generous to you. So I would say that was my experience generally.
Amazing. And I mean, yeah, Azerbaijan isn't, as you kind of alluded to there, it isn't your usual kind of, I guess, traditional digital nomad location, right? I mean, have you been to any other countries that kind of fit a similar bill?
Yeah, I would say so. And many of them are absolutely worth visiting and spending time in. One of them that is not super easy to travel to, but I really enjoyed, is Iran, or Iran, depending on how people pronounce that, which is just south of Azerbaijan, which I really enjoyed. Georgia, to the sort of northwest of Azerbaijan, is also a great option for digital nomads. They're also doing a digital nomad visa. They're one of the 4 countries right now that are doing a digital nomad visa.
Sorry to jump in there, Lavinia. I know Estonia is one of the countries. I didn't realize there were 4. Do you know the others as well?
So Estonia is doing, I think a lot of people know of one or both of the 2 things that Estonia is doing. So they're doing a kind of location-independent incorporation for companies. So they're the kind of, I would say, the first country in the world that really understood what it means to run a business on the go, and allow people to get an e-residency and open a company there, do their taxes, pay service providers, and run the entire thing without ever needing to step foot in Estonia. We Liv.it have such a branch in there as well, so Liv.it Estonia, which I'm very happy with, and I can go into it if you want, in terms of just like sort of advice for people who might be looking for that sort of setup. And they're also trying to investing a lot in startups and so on. And we all know some big names that came out of such a small country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing a digital nomad visa. There's also Barbados that is doing a digital nomad visa right now. And there's Georgia who's doing one. And I believe there's another fourth country, but I can't remember it right now. Like I keep seeing all this news. And my guess is that there will be other countries following suit as well.
Yeah.
Thailand is offering a sort of a startup visa or so. It's definitely got some like sort of requirements tied into it, but that's also possible for those who are want to spend a good amount of time in there and so on.
Mm-hmm. So with Liv.it Estonia, is that something that when the company was first started, like Estonia was the hub, or was it something that was later added?
No, it was later added actually late last year. So
Okay.
It's very new. I was just looking for a solution to service and do business easier with European clients within the European jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that made a lot of sense. But Liv.it was started in Bali, and it is headquartered in Bali.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good a transition as we're going to get to talk about Liv.it. So would you be able to give our audience kind of a bit of a flavor of what you do and why?
Sure. So we are basically a support system for entrepreneurs and for startup teams. And we have a number of moving pieces that make up that ecosystem. So we have a physical hub in Bali called Liv.it Hub Bali, where we have co-working and event and innovation spaces. And we also have basically a digital hub, I would call it, where we offer all kinds of services that have to do with business growth and support. So we can help people with incorporating in Indonesia. We can help people with growing scalable, remote capable teams around the world. We can help people with remote recruitment, headhunting, talent acquisition, however we want to call it, what's the level you're looking at. And we can help a variety of organizations, not only startups, with training on entrepreneurship, the future of work, and so on. We also have, in regular times to say so, we curate getaway events and retreats in Bali for both founders and startup teams through a brand that is called Project Getaway. Since the pandemic started, actually, around the time the pandemic started, we also started a remote skills academy where we teach Indonesians to work remotely and to kind of close the gap between the digital nomads that come to Bali and have the Instagrammable life, mm-hmm. and the locals who usually end up in service jobs that are low paid and not very flexible, and they're also subject to vanish in a situation like this.
Sure. Okay. So, wow, a lot to unpack there. So I guess I'll probably start off with the hubs, I think. So did the physical hub come first, or was it the online?
So actually, neither one. It's funny. So we are two business partners. My business partner is called Michael Bodekar. He is from Denmark, and he came to Bali in the early 2010s. And he basically, he was what we would, I guess, call a corporate escapee, right? Like he was running away from a corporate job, and he didn't really miss the meetings and the timesheets and all of the things of the office life, but he missed, being around great people and brainstorming great ideas and so on. So he basically initially started a co-living community for founders, which eventually evolved into all of the things that Liv.it is right now. several years ago, like 3-4 years ago. He basically moved on to focus on a different business, and I took over, and I sort of came up with the concept for Liv.it Hub Bali, which, as I was saying, is one of our brands and one of our services. So initially kind of drew it on a recycled piece of paper, and then proceeded to look for buildings that could be transformed into what we had in mind.
Fantastic. And what did that look like? Was that just you kind of on the floor visiting all these locations and kind of thinking what they could be turned into? Or is it very much like you had a spec of things that the building and the facility needed to offer, and then you were just kind of hoping that something came up that fit the bill?
There was no way something that fit the bill would come up, because what I had in mind was a variety of different types of spaces, some of them for, fixed desks, some of them for collaborative spaces, things like an app or quiet room and Skype rooms, one of which I'm sitting in right now, and, kind of fun or relaxation spaces and so on. So I think it would have been a tall ask to look for a building that already had those things. So what I initially looked for was a building that could easily be transformed into what I had in mind. So the building that we are in right now is a former factory. They used to make clothing. They used to export to New York, and it would be the kind of clothes that you would expect David Bowie to make an appearance in.
Wow.
Very I've arrived type of outfits. But they had gone bankrupt about 4 years before we walked into the building. It was basically a collection of like 4 floors of giant holes, right? That could just like be partitioned and turned into what grew to eventually be Liv.it Hub. So basically we kind of, the only thing that we kept was the shell of the building, right? Like we redid the plumbing, the electricity, built a bunch of rooms, a kitchen, lots of bathrooms, and all kinds of stuff. So it's unrecognizable if you would have seen it back then.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so pleased that you've been able to grow it. And I wondered if you'd be able to talk about how you actually managed to kind of get customers to that, whether you were able to tap into an existing base or whether you just had to go out and kind of network or kind of use digital marketing. What did that process look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of the companies that or teams that we work with right now come from companies that were developed in that co-living space that we had originally. So as you can imagine, lots of ideas were floating around, lots of projects were being worked on, and some of them really took flight and started to, need a lot of team members and a proper setup and everything. So we are very much a big part of our space is business to business. So it's teams working from the space. And then obviously we are open to individuals, to B2C at the same time. I would say on the B2C side, Google Maps and Google reviews and things like that is a huge source. Mm-hmm. Coworker.com really helps, being listed there and having reviews there. Word of mouth is probably the biggest one, but people just being like, it's a really productive space. People are really nice. Go there if you're going to Bali and so on. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And with that side of things, is it kind of like a drop-in sort of situation, or is it very much like you have to book a space in advance?
It's very much a drop-in because the space that we launched with is about a third bigger than we needed, perhaps even 40-50% bigger than we needed. But it was a good deal and we were able to kind of build it in the way that we wanted. So it's very much like we have a lot of availability right now, especially during these times where a lot of people are still not very comfortable co-working. So it's very much a drop-in situation at this point. If you do want a fixed desk with a certain setup, or you want a larger team to work there, obviously there would be some some arrangements that need to be made. But
sure. And in terms of what you offer at the online hub, what does that comprise of? Is it like resources? Is it a membership kind of login?
So it's basically separate services. I would say that most of the companies that work with us, I would say right now it's a portfolio of 10 to 12 companies. They take a variety of services because they kind of make sense to be added to each other. So what we do for those who want to run businesses in Indonesia or open a company in Indonesia, we walk them through that sort of setup, and we can sort of manage things for them, even simple things like visas and so on if you want to be here for a longer time. And we basically have, as I was saying, all kinds of training services, recruitment services, which are ran from Estonia, recruitment, talent acquisition, remote, most of it. So that service has been very popular now.
Sure, I bet.
The pandemic kicked in, and everybody's like, "Oh, where are those people who were doing that crazy remote work team building thing before?" Those bits, and then obviously we have the as I was saying, in regular times, and I do hope they return at some point, this curated getaway or retreat event, either for a company or for a kind of curated group of founders that we bring together, usually once a year. And then consultancy and education on a bunch of different services, on a bunch of different topics.
Mm-hmm. For the online hub, obviously you mentioned like lots of different services there. How did you decide which services you should offer and which services your company was best placed to offer rather than somebody else?
I would say it was a very organic process where, so the community of founders that we've worked with and that grew and evolved over time, they would need various things, and we would be like, oh, perhaps we can do this, and we would try it out, and then we would be like, oh yeah, that's definitely something we can offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of things we have definitely gotten demand before having that service. People asking, oh, do you do this? Do you do that? And we were like, oh, I guess we can explore, right? If we can, and if it's worth it. So it's definitely a more organic process rather than, okay, this is kind of our business strategy. There was definitely a business strategy behind a few of the things, one of them being the hub, one of them being the Remote Skills Academy and other things, but lots of them also evolved organically.
I love that explanation, because I think that's the way with like 99% of businesses. There are certain things that you kind of do some strategic thinking and actually sit down and say, okay, based on the skill set, based on the resources we have here, it makes sense to offer, if we do X, it makes sense to offer Y. So like with me and copywriting, based on my experience as a digital marketer, I started out, with the copywriting, just writing landing pages and emails. And then I thought, well, based on that, people will need kind of a full funnel approach. If they've got landing pages, right, then they will need ads to use for paid traffic for that. If they're doing that, then they'll need email automations. And that was very much kind of a strategic thing. But from the kind of organic thing, again, with the copywriting example, I've had people just say, okay, do you do brochures? And I would say, haven't done them yet. if you want to try one, then we can do it. And then it's about kind of taking those principles, because if you understand what makes good copy in one medium, all you have to do is transpose the medium and work out what rules apply and whether you're best placed to offer it or not. So I love kind of that mix of organic, kind of demand-led, do you do this? Questions versus the more strategic, I think we should go there based on this. I love that.
Absolutely. And there's something to be said about both approaches, right? But I do think that people like to do business with people they trust. And if they bought something from you and they're happy with the result, they will most likely want to buy something else from you because they trust you as a person, not particularly as a hyper specialist of brochures in your case, right?
Sure.
And then also there's something to be said about the number of times you're being asked about something. So we would have at the hub, we would very often have drop-ins who were asking, do you offer virtual office services, right? And it was never in our plan, but then we looked into it and we were like, okay, what do we need to do in order to offer that? And then we realized that a big amount of the buildings on the market do not have the proper paperwork to be able to offer that, right? Like the building authorization and all kinds of stuff. And we were like, okay, yeah, we can. That's definitely like, it's not something we're going to start advertising and really trying to make lots of money from, but it's another thing that we can do and help our clients who are looking for something like that.
Mm-hmm. How many people would you say it takes before you should start paying attention to these requests?
I'm going to give the very unpopular answer of it depends, because it really does. It depends to me, it very much depends how much work needs to be put into being able to offer that service at a very decent level, right? Because once you've got a brand, you don't want to flop, right? Like you don't want to offer something that is like, oh, we had no idea what we were doing, so we just decided to offer this, right? So I always look at that. I'm like, have we got the right business licenses to do it? If it's the case, how many hours of work would we need to put into to see, to even decide if that's something that we want to do. Do we need to acquire or get any tool or any infrastructure or any permit that would need some kind of an expense, and then you take it from there, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, there could be 3 people asking you about something that is quite low value and easy to implement, and you can do it, or there could be 20 and it could be a lot of effort and a lot of opportunity costs as well, which I guess a lot of us forget about, right? We're like, what could we be doing with that time, right? That we're investing into this. And could be 20 people and you're still not going to do it, right? So, or 100 or who knows. I would say it's very much based on considering your own situation, your own business, and the cost, the opportunity cost, and the potential gain that you can have.
That makes a lot of sense. So kind of just mapping out the opportunity, the potential upsides and the potential downsides. So, the revenue that you could make, the potential new clients you could bring in terms of the upside, but versus the downside, kind of how long and it would take you to implement it, how much resources would be required to do so, and then kind of all the different things that I don't want to kind of reiterate exactly what you said, but kind of all the different things that go into that, making, getting it to a good standard where you're actually fulfilling the customer's desire.
Absolutely. And I do think that while this sounds like a very organic process, right? Like people asked about brochures or they asked about virtual office and whatever, to kind of go into those things, you have to go a little bit into the other approach where you're researching and doing a little bit of that other like strategic approach. Because for example, in our case, we would look at what other people charge on the market. Are they able to offer the same level of service? How many people there are around that want that? Like, do we have any data on that? And so on. So you would, although it starts as something organic, you would still very much go a little bit into the data-driven approach to, price it and so on.
Definitely. And I think it should be said as well, just because you do decide to offer something doesn't mean that you have to offer it forever. So for example, for me, with the same example, I did one brochure. It didn't particularly wow me. I didn't think that, I wasn't in love with the process. I didn't necessarily think there was a big market there, to be a brochure copywriter. And so I don't advertise it on my website. I don't take up any space kind of talking to prospects about it. But, maybe in the future, if somebody comes to me and asks for one, I'll consider it. But maybe I won't. Maybe at the same time, I'll go, no, I know what's involved there. That's not where I want to take my business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also very much think that that way you can also discover something that might be more lucrative and might be you might be giving up some of the things that you started off doing, right? To do more of that thing. And that's the reality with a lot of startups. It's a very few startups are what they started or what they set out to be, right? They pivoted and they reinvented and yeah.
Sure, like not even startups, like established multinational companies fall into the same thing. So I think like Nokia, the phone company, I'm pretty sure they started as a rubber company, which has literally nothing to do with it. So just because you've been known for one thing doesn't mean that you should be known for that thing. And then in most cases as well, being tied to one thing means the death of your company ultimately. And that might not be in a couple of years, it might not be in a decade, but maybe in 100 years, people aren't necessarily going to need what you offer. So there's that kind of evolution there and not being tied to one service. But the brand aspect is still really important. That's how you can move from one service to another, is by being known for, as a brand, for being trustworthy, for being honest, for being somebody wants to do business with, because they go, okay, well, you did that last thing well. There must be a reason for you kind of picking this area, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And even investors, right? They pick the team. They don't pick the product. They pick who's behind it and how much trust they have in those people, what's the track record, or what's the indication that there's a lot of potential. That being said, I do have to take a minute to say that there's a lot to be said about focus as well. So once you've found something that really works for you and you see that there's potential scalability and there's, definitely a market that you want to explore and so on, there's a lot to be said about dropping everything else and really focusing on that.
Sure. And I think that's the same, like in both in a professional sense, but a personal sense as well. Like if you can see the big things that are going to make that impact, to make your life better, to make your company better, to make your relationships better, a lot of being successful is saying no. Like you have all of these opportunities and people like us get approached with various opportunities all the time. There are so many different businesses we could go into or streams of revenue. Like knowing when to say no to things is just as important, because it means if you say yes to everything, you won't be able to do any of them well, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's one that a lot of us have trouble with, right? Because we get excited as entrepreneurs. We get excited about ideas and we're going after the next cute, shiny thing that attracts our attention and sounds great and so on. And there just comes a time where you need to say, no, I've got this few things that are working really well and I'm going to stick with them.
Yeah, I found that quite tricky because I get like a lot of my energy from other people. And when I can see somebody's really excited about an idea, I tend to get quite excited about that one anyway. But so in terms of, you mentioned some changes that you've had to make with the retreats. And obviously, like with coronavirus, very, very understandable reasons why you had to make those. Have you had to make kind of any other changes to the other side of the business to cope with COVID?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say COVID has very significantly affected our business in both positive and negative ways. So there's a suite of services that are basically on hold right now because of Corona. So the retreats and curated getaways are obviously off the table right now. There's no entry to Indonesia for most foreigners unless you have a residence permit. So even if we wanted to, that wouldn't be an option. And then generally like larger events, which we used to host at the hub, we used to run educational programs for students here, like Startup Week type of events and so on. Those are off the table too. And co-working is basically down 80-90% in terms of membership presence at the hub and so on. And that is absolutely expected, right? In the current circumstances, I would say in any other country that would be the case for the bigger part, but Indonesia relying a lot on people coming in as digital nomads and so on is even more affected in that way, right? So those services over here are sleeping for the time being. But at the same time, a number of things that we are doing and have been doing remotely for a long time. I was mentioning recruitment, I was mentioning training, I was mentioning like business support, business development type of services. They have really been in demand because people are trying to figure out a way, like if we only think of our experience of building scalable, remote capable teams over the last many, many years. We have learned a lot of things that work, many that don't, and we're happy to share. And there are a lot of people who thought this would take a few weeks and then we'd be back at the office. And now understanding that this might be a semi-permanent change, right, for a lot of companies, because the tech startups are leading the way and they're saying remote work indefinitely, right? So a lot of other companies are following that. So I would say those things, or training services on how to work, how to acquire skills that allow you to work remotely for Indonesians and so on. Those have been definitely in demand, and we've been doing lots and lots of work on that. So in a way, it has kind of compensated. And something I'm personally really, really proud of is the fact that our team at Liv.it Hub that would normally be, interception, front desk, would be running errands, operations, and so on, we have worked really hard to kind of figure out a way to transfer their skills and add more skills so that they can project manage remote projects, like courses online. They can teach, they can host events online, and so on. And they are doing amazing. And I'm really, really proud of them.
No, fantastic. I think that's a huge achievement. And also not just an achievement to make it happen, but to have kind of the motivation and desire to make it happen in the first place. Because I think there are, unfortunately, too many companies that would just say, okay, this person used to do that. That's it. That job no longer exists, so we no longer need that person. So I think to put your hand up as a company and say, we're working for this person for a reason, it's because of who that person is. Like, we can train them up on other skills that they need so they can fulfill other jobs. I think that's really admirable.
Thank you for saying that, but it's also so much part of our philosophy. Like, I'm a huge future of work enthusiast, and I believe that this is the future of work. It's not us learning how to do front desk work and doing that for the next 30 years, right? It's being the kind of people who can start in a front desk job and then go into project management or teaching online or training or who knows what next, right? All you need is the desire to learn. So it would have been very hypocritical of us to not act in that way, right? It would have felt very inauthentic to say, okay, just because our team is doing mostly operations and those will be on hold for a while, what can we do? I had a very strong commitment to not let anybody go during this pandemic, and obviously you can support that for a while, but you can also like figure out how to create meaningful work, not only important work that is sustainable, but it's also meaningful. So they're walking out of this pandemic whenever it ends with their jobs, their full salaries, and double the skills that they started with, and with a huge satisfaction of having done something for fellow Indonesians that also want and deserve better opportunities.
Fantastic. So in terms of that, what do businesses need to look for in their new hires? The sort of characteristics, the traits that will mean that they do have somebody potentially for life, no matter the role that they're in?
I mean, I don't think we're going to have people for life. It doesn't matter what we do, because there's something to be said about movement. There's something to be said about new experiences and so on. But I do think that you can significantly lengthen the retention that you have with people that you really like in your organization. I would say a few things. Definitely attitudes and behaviors are more important than hard skills. For example, the attitude, the behavior, the belief that that you can learn anything and you can do it fast is much more important than any technical or hard skill that any person could have, because you give that person a couple of months or the right mentorship or both, and they'll just know that, right? So that's definitely one of them. I love that quote that says, the illiterate of the 21st century are the people who are not able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I really, really think it's very true, because none of us is in a job where we'll just learn how to do it and we'll still be doing it this way in 10 years from now, or even 2 years from now, right? And I think entrepreneurs and freelancers and digital nomads know that the best, because we're constantly reinventing what we do. And as an entrepreneur in a company that is growing, you're constantly needing to forget everything you've learned how to do in the past few years. Let go, delegate, learn a new role, and go forth, right, with that. So I think that definitely this ability and this willingness to learn, and I would say is one of the most important things that people can look out for. And just for me personally, a good balance between being able to work, to be good at teamwork, but also be a strong individual contributor is an important one, because we do need to do both. Mm-hmm. And if we're missing one of those parts, if it's, they're called in the startup world, like brilliant assholes, right? If it's a brilliant asshole that is really good at individual contribution, but is blowing up your team, or the other way around, right? Like somebody who can only function in a team and so on is probably not a great combination for the future of work and where we're headed. And I think the ability to connect dots. So basically, all of the things that I'm talking about are very much right side of brain type of skills. So anything that is left side of the brain, sort of sequential, analytical, kind of a few steps that you have to follow, very algorithmic, to say so, is being automated right as we speak. I can hear the algorithms being at it, right? And everything that needs anything that has to do with cross skills, cross-platform connecting things, a more holistic approach, problem solving, creativity, and all of those things are things that are gonna not only that they are very exciting, but they're gonna be very safe for a while, because robots are great, but my computer still sometimes can't connect with the printer. So I think we're good.
Nice. No, I was thinking about what you're saying about the characteristics and traits, because we spend so much energy and time and resources in our businesses trying to find the right people. So when you have found somebody, you want to do everything you can to kind of ensure that you can keep them, just from a selfish perspective, because you really don't want high turnover, because replacing those people is a real pain in the ass, to be honest. So I've kind of always subscribed to if we can find somebody good, and by good, I mean they share the characteristics that I kind of want them to have, not necessarily the hard skills. I think sometimes the soft skills, the communication and stuff like that is more important. So when I work with people, the kind of things that I look for, proactivity is incredibly important to me. People who look for jobs to do and look for ways to improve the company, but also themselves. So that's something that I've always been very good at. So I probably value that in other people because of my own experience. I've always looked for additional courses that I could go on, or training, or I've seen areas and wondered, okay, maybe I could do that. But honesty and transparency are incredibly important, but also really good communication skills. I think you can have all the others, but without good communication skills, it all goes to pot anyway, because people have misunderstandings and things don't happen because people make assumptions that somebody else was going to do that job because it wasn't communicated properly and things like that. So they're kind of the things that I look for. I think for the most part, lots of other jobs, I'm not going to say all jobs, can be taught. There are some kind of characteristics and experiences that people have that are only capable, for them to do at a really, really high level, because the training that they would have to go through would be so significant, and they might never get to that level. So kind of the things that I'm thinking about here are stuff in the hard sciences, certain types of programming as well, in terms of the experience that's needed there is so significant that it doesn't make sense to find people who have these traits and then train them up. You basically just need to flip it on its head and find the people that already have those skills and try and find the ones that have the characteristics within that subset. But it's really, really important.
And I think that's the challenge of scaling, right? How to find both. Once you need like a significant technical hard skills, and you want the soft ones as well.
So once we have those characteristics in our head of, this is what we want and we're going to train that person up, for example, how do we go about finding those people, or if we have them in the traditional kind of job application routine, interview, that sort of thing, how do we actually find out whether these people have those characteristics that we're looking for?
Yeah, I think listening to you, and I think you have a lot of, you had a lot of great points on that. I think it also, there's a lot to be said about enunciating your values to yourself and to other people. And let's put a strike through on values and say behaviors, because you say integrity, but that can mean 5 different things for 5 different people, or 10 different things for the same number of people, right? Or we can say high performance teamwork, which is one of our values. But if you don't break that down into behaviors that are encouraged or expected in your organization, that can mean very different things, right? So one thing, kind of a side note, but very much related, what we've done is that we actually went through that process of enunciating those values and then breaking them down in behaviors, and our entire performance and feedback process is kind of centered around them, right? So we don't even have them in the hub as a poster or something like that. They are very much things that are at the base of what we do. I would say, if you are serious about building a company, the best thing you can do is to build an employer brand. So in the same way you sell the experience of being a customer to your customers, you would sell the experience of the experience of being employed or working with your company to potential talent, right? Because it is a war for talent. Like we're not looking for like the next data entry person that can just sit there and enter data, right? It's again, there's probably somebody automating or outsourcing that, right? So we're looking for people who can actively and smartly contribute to our companies. So the best way to hire, to attract great people, is to be known as a great employer. And there are many, many different ways that you can do that. Some as simple as owning the Glassdoor profile, which a lot of candidates look up to, and it's free, so you can kind of start replying to what people say there. You might discover you already have some that you didn't even know of, some reviews, because people can do that without you knowing. To things like word of mouth, which again is very important, right? Like what do people who work for you right now say about working for you? Would the famous ENPS score, right? Would people who work for you or with you right now recommend the same thing to others? I think a lot of people don't think of that, and they don't take the time to hear the other side of the story. They might think they're a great employer, but if you ask the team members, they don't particularly agree. And things like sort of talking about how it is to, on the blog or on your social media and so on. Obviously, not making up stories, but talking about how it is to work at or for your company. Kind of introducing the team members. There's always a lot to be said about like putting faces on, the people that your customers might be talking to, and so on. So I would say that's definitely the strongest, best strategy to attract people that fit in your organization, because it's a pull effect, right? It's like people will head your way who might already be a great fit, right? Having a referral program, running a referral program in your company or amongst your clients or partners or people that know your culture well, right? That's also a great way to go. In terms of selecting people that might be applying and so on, again, I could talk about this for a while. There are a few ways to look at that. So, you might be working with a recruiter, a specialist, or a company or so on to get those people on board, which will take a part of screening people through for those specific things that you've sort of communicated with them. But there are also things like there's this little bot called Astronaut that allows you to automate screening interviews, right? They can take a lot of time if you have a lot of applicants, right? So you can basically ask people to record themselves giving answers to a number of questions, and then pick the answers that are really important for you and decide based on that, instead of spending entire days, going through screening interviews and at some point just being like, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's just get this one guy, right? So there are a lot of different ways of doing that. I would say if you're a small company and if you're just starting to hire, definitely being clear on those things that are important for you and asking your potential collaborators, freelancers, existing team partners, clients to recommend you people might be one of the safest and free ways to get great candidates, right? Mm-hmm. And then just being a nice person to work with is probably the best hack, to say so.
Sure. So just being kind of the type of person that people want to work around as well. And I think I just want to, because I feel like it got missed because your answer was so comprehensive and wonderful. The thing that you said most like at the beginning of that answer was probably the most striking part to me. This kind of separation between values and behaviors. So looking at what values and actually writing them down and being explicit about the values that you find most important, both in yourself, in your company, and anybody who works with your company or for your company. But then distilling those values and looking for examples of those behaviors in practice in whoever you're interviewing. So you mentioned integrity at the beginning, and I can think, okay, well, how would we look for a behavior that shows kind of integrity or lack thereof? So one question might be, when did you make a mistake in your previous role? And I can think, for me, like the answer that comes to mind is when I was working at a previous agency and I was heading up a paid campaign, the dates changed and I basically overspent by quite a bit the client's money accidentally, because one of the paid campaigns, the date range, the flight and launch dates changed. And then you kind of ask, well, how did you handle that? And kind of listen for the steps that they went through and whether they immediately told somebody or, who they told, in what manner, and trying to pick out those actual behaviors rather than just, like, as you said, which is an incredibly valuable point. Values is one thing. This is kind of, the thoughts that we have our belief system, but what we actually need to find is examples of those belief systems being carried out, those values actually taking place. And that is the behavior aspect of it, because I think anybody can say that they value honesty and transparency and communication. Like, those all sound like really great interview answers, but until you kind of look at the actual behaviors and whether somebody ticked those off or made a mistake in that area and didn't follow through with what they supposedly believe, we're kind of just taking them at their word. That's one of the issues that I find with interviews as a concept. Like, anybody can come across really well in an interview and then be absolutely awful to work with or bad at their job. And conversely, unfortunately, some people don't do very well in the interview situation and miss out on jobs and roles that they'd be fantastic at. Other than kind of, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much here because it's a huge question. It's basically kind of like reframing the whole hiring scenario. But are there other things that people can do and companies can do to move away from just focusing on interviews to hire for the people that we're talking about, the people that, you know, are capable of doing lots of different roles, the people that we do want to stick around for a long time?
I would say I very much agree with you that there are people that just interview well, and you will then be very surprised what you're so obviously you can interview in a more mindful way and in a more thoughtful way and well-planned way, or you can just ask some generic questions. And obviously the first option is better, but there are definitely quite a few things you can't rule out. No matter, you can be a professional recruiter and there would just be people who are just very skilled applicants, very skilled candidates, right? Like, they're very good at getting jobs. So obviously relying just on interviews is probably not a great idea. I would say if the job can be a more entry-level type of job, I would really recommend working with, let's say, internship programs or kind of fresh graduate programs. There's one notable one that we actually work with. It's called Start Me Up Careers. It's actually started by a British woman, and she basically trains people and places them in remote internships that then very often turn into jobs, right? So that's a very good way of getting somebody that is a little bit supervised and mentored by someone else already and had gone through a vetting process and can have a potentially unpaid internship with you. And then if you're happy, you turn that into a position that obviously needs a bit of a time commitment and investment of time, but it's a very valid way of doing it if you're into nurturing talent, right? Like, the job is not super sophisticated, as you were saying. You need to study years and years to even get started on it. If it's a more senior position, I would say always try to look for referrals, for genuine referrals from people that have worked with the person. Try to do short-term work with them if you can, right? Work with them as a contractor, collaborator, have a limited contract with them, and see how things are going. We recruit a lot. We've recruited for about 250 roles for a client so far, and we still make mistakes in recruitment. And there's no way to eliminate those, as we were just saying, right? There are some people that just fly under the radar or above the radar, right? So basically, again, asking for recommendations, for referrals, trying to work with those people in some sort of capacity before, throwing everything in and so on would probably be some of the best ways to avoid that. For me, nurturing talent is a massive one. So just like investing that time to train people and shape them in a way that, you kind of see the potential there, and then you shape them in the way that your organization kind of is and needs people is great. Many of the people in our team have been the core part of our team, has been with us for 5 years or 5+ years.
Fantastic. No, I love that. And it goes back to like, you find somebody good, why would you let them go? Like, you do everything you can to keep them and make use of their skill set, because you already know some of the most important things about them. You already know like their character. You already know how they perform under pressure. You already know what happens when they're put in the situations that they're going to be experiencing again, but in a different role. So I love that. Fantastic.
Absolutely. At the same time, do not depend on people staying with you forever. So there's a lot to be said about organizational memory. Like, get serious about documenting your processes and the things, especially the repeated stuff, because you do not know, right? You do not know when people need to leave you without wanting to, or, you know.
Sure. And now, like, SOPs and just really, really valuable tool to document this. And it's something that I've kind of started doing in the last year, really, those repeat tasks. So it's literally as easy as just firing up Loom or Zoom and recording yourself and just going through it step by step. It doesn't need to be a big detailed thing, because I tend to find with people, the more detailed or the more time it thinks that they think that it's going to take, the less likely they are to do it in the first place. And they don't feel as justified. So I would say short looms, totally with you, a great way of doing it. Another great way of doing it is sort of Asana or whatever is your project management software of choice, templates, right? And then like a little bit of description, sending to the right links or the right documents or whatever. Even something like that can go a long way, and it doesn't take you more than 20 minutes to put one together. Or if you like writing, just a long list of bullet points or whatever. If you're more sophisticated and into you're going to want to scale, something like Trainual can help a lot, where you have all of the things in an actual system and it saves you so much time. So this kind of projects are some of the things we've been working on with clients to help them be able to scale. Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like you're doing a fantastic job with Liv.it of improving things for entrepreneurs and their teams and how they hire and how they run and scale their businesses. But I think you're also doing great things for kind of the Indonesians and people kind of in the local area as well. So I think that's really commendable. Where can people go to find out more, both about yourself and Liv.it and what you guys are accomplishing?
Absolutely. So our website is pretty straightforward, liv.it. So that's I'm guessing you'd put that into the show notes as well. And so our website has a lot of the things we do and links to other websites that are related to what we do. And I'm always happy to hear from people or connect via LinkedIn. So it's my name. I guess you'll have it. You'll have a direct link in the notes as well. And then connecting via social media through our accounts to stay in touch and perhaps see what we're up to.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lavinia. I think our audience will appreciate this episode. I really do. So thank you again, and speak to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're quite welcome. And that's it for today. You've been listening to the Working From Home podcast with me, Nelson Jordan. We've been talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly side of remote work. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you've enjoyed the time you've spent with us today. If you'd like to discuss the podcast, you want to make a new friend, or you're interested in working with me on a copywriting or digital marketing project, then visit nelson-jordan.com. That's nelson-jordan.com, where you can also sign up to my newsletter to hear about this podcast and other exciting projects. Until next week, goodbye.